What's up, everyone? It's Trevor, host of The Formula here. Really pumped to drop the second part of a three-part series with documentary filmmaker and advocate against sex trafficking, Vanessa McNeal. Part one, you can find in the show notes. That's Vanessa's origin story, where she came from and how she became the person that she is today. Part two is going to be her inspiration behind Gridshock and some advice for how you can get involved in your community to help fight sex trafficking today. So I'm going to keep this intro short and sweet because I really want to get to this interview with Vanessa. But first, let's hear from our sponsors real quick, and then we will get the show started. The Formula podcast wouldn't be possible without some pretty awesome sponsors that are willing to support the show. So the first sponsor has been with us for quite some time. That's Lady Boss. They provide women's workouts and health supplements to help women live healthier lives. Now, if you're interested in checking out any of their workouts or their supplements, go ahead and head to theformulapodcast.com and check out our sponsored products page. Now, our second sponsor just got started with us here recently. That's Liquid Web. Now, if you've listened to any of our episodes with like Adrian or Ketsu or anybody that's doing any type of drop shipping or e-commerce, Liquid Web has some e-commerce solutions to help you get a store up and running ASAP. And they were willing to actually give 33% off to people who listen to the Formula podcast. So when you go to liquidweb.com and check out their products, make sure and type in Formula 33 when you check out to get 33% off. Big thanks to them for hooking us up and keeping this show rolling. That's all from our sponsors. Now, let's do this thing.
Let's talk a little bit about Gridshock. Where did your inspiration from that come?
So I was in grad school when I learned about sex trafficking. I had someone come to our class and talk to us about it briefly. And I was just shocked because, like most people in Iowa, I had no idea that it was happening here. But the more I dug and the more I was able to work with survivors and hear their stories, I wasn't only shocked by the violent nature of it. I was more shocked by the fact that people just don't know about it. And if they think that they have an idea, a lot of the times people are wrong. Mm-hmm. So I knew after talking with those survivors, the average life expectancy of a survivor once they enter the life is only 7 years. And I knew from the moment I met those women that I had to tell their stories. Mm-hmm. So it really started from there and grew really big.
Yeah. So you had this, you found out about through grad school, you had this idea to make the documentary. What was the process of making it like? What did you... I'm sure you learned a lot of stuff that you were surprised. Yeah, I'm sure you were like, oh my God, I cannot believe this is actually real, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to share some of that stuff?
Yeah, totally. Lots of research, lots of networking, just really finding people that were working on the ground in this area on the issue and really advising me because I really didn't know a lot when I first started.
Yeah.
And then meeting more people that were willing to talk in the film and essentially deciding to do that 90-day all or nothing campaign.
Yeah.
And then going from there.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the most surprising part was?
The most surprising part is that there are a lot of men, typically, it's men that are buyers, that there's a lot of men willing to pay a lot of money to have sex with people, a lot of men willing to pay a lot of money to have sex with kids. And they're people that walk among us every day. They're doctors, lawyers, bankers, school teachers, family men, military men.
Yeah. I don't know. I imagine everyone that hears that is just absolutely just disgusted, but it also makes me think there's probably people that we all know that are partaking in this. And so we have that knowledge now. We know that this is a problem. How big of a problem is it in Iowa?
So I don't like to use statistics because it's so hard to quantify an issue of this magnitude, and it's so underground that how could you even find the right numbers for that? And that's the mistake I made in the beginning. I started off like, here in Iowa, we have, there's different, you'll see different numbers, but how could you substantiate something like that? I would do it no justice. And if I'm saying something, it would be way more than what is the reality. But it's a major problem. It's happening in every single community in Iowa, just like it's happening in every community around the world.
Yeah. So now that we know it's a huge problem, and I mean, even like, I don't know.
Even if it was one person.
Yeah, it's just like, so we know that it's a problem. We know that it's taking place with people that we've probably met or know. What do we do? Like, what do we do to help?
I think the biggest thing that we have to do is establish understanding on what the problem actually is. So a lot of people think that sex trafficking is kidnapping. Someone thinks that you're like kidnapped from your house and you're taken away and you're locked in a basement in shackles.
Yeah.
That's typically not the case. Most people know the person trafficking them.
Yeah.
Most people in Iowa, we have what is called place-based trafficking, where you have people, let's say a 12-year-old, living and existing in our community, but they're being trafficked. So they go to school and they come home and maybe mom or dad or uncle or neighbor or soccer coach is trafficking them, and then they're returned back home. So like, you're not suspecting it, and it's happening within the community. That happens so often, but people think, oh, you had to be kidnapped because too many people have watched Taken, right? And they're just like, oh, you have to be grabbed, when we should know by now that most sexual violence, sexual abuse happens in the context of relationships. It's usually by people that we know, and it's the same with trafficking.
Yeah. So we know that to be the case. We have the understanding now. Now we know. Now we know that that's the case. Okay, now what?
I think the second biggest thing to do is just always be vigilant. I think that we have this veil over our eyes and our lives where we're not paying attention to what happens. I mean, this is so underground that most of the time it's not something that you're going to see happen in community. But just like paying attention, like if you're out and about and you see two people or several people that don't look like they belong in the same group together, question that.
Yeah.
Like if you have a child that's missing school, if they're always being taken out of school Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2:00, well, where are they going? Who's picking them up? Like if there's change in anyone's behavior, whether it's a child and an adult, question that.
Yeah.
There's just so much questioning that we need to do in order to like hear about this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's also, and paying attention as well to what's going on. Like, change in behavior is probably huge.
So big.
Yeah, I don't have much experience or any experience in the field at all, so I'm speaking from no experience. But I imagine that if something happens where something wasn't happening before, there's probably a significant behavioral change, especially in a kid.
And it's something where most people aren't going to be banging on doors to get help.
Yeah.
Because what trafficking is exploiting vulnerabilities, and they build like a trusting relationship with that person, or a fear-based relationship with that person, so they know the consequences. They know what will happen if they tell, so they don't.
Okay.
So also be aware of that. I think that we have this facade reality about like, oh, if there was a problem, they would let me know. It's usually not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about the minor problems I have. I'm not going calling anyone, be like, hey, can you help me out? It's more like you just kind of try to deal with it on your own first. So let's say that someone's in that situation where they become aware that there's a change in behavior or something setting off some red flags. What do they do from there?
I'll give you a really good example. So I was traveling a couple of months ago, and I noticed a girl, she was probably 16, going through the airport, and she was with a man who walked her up to security and watched her go through security, which may not seem that unusual, except I noticed that the relationship felt very forced. You could tell that she didn't want to be around him. So she ended up being on my plane.
Yeah.
And she was sitting in first class by herself, or what appeared to be by herself, and she was crying. And she was just really upset. And I remember making eye contact with her, and she looked at me like she needed help.
Yeah.
So I remember looking at her seat number, and my seat was in the back of the plane, and I pulled the flight attendant aside, and I said, let's go in the back and talk. I have training in trafficking. I don't know if this is trafficking, but here's some of the warning signs. Like, she's old enough to walk through security by herself. Why did that man make sure that she got through?
Yeah.
Why is she upset? You have to kind of figure out who that person was, where she's going, why, who's picking her up. And I said, do not go up to her and ask her if she's okay, because that not only puts you in danger, but that puts her in danger, because you don't know who's sitting around her.
Yeah.
You don't know if her trafficker is sitting behind her pretending that he doesn't know her. So I said, get her off the plane, get her to a safe place, and ask her these questions. What did she do? She walked right up to her and said, hey, how are you doing? Is everything okay? And of course she said, yes, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And she came back and she said something like, I can't haggle her. We have rules on the plane about haggling people. And I said, well, if this was a bomb, or if I said that was a terrorist, you would really take her safety seriously. So TSA ended up coming on. They said that was her dad that dropped her off, and her mom was going to be picking her up at her arrival.
Yeah.
We don't know that to be true.
Yeah.
That could be the trafficker and another person associated picking her back up as she's traveling. So in that example, you contact the authorities, you hope and trust that they are able to do what they're supposed to do. And outside of that, I wasn't able to do anything else.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to have that conversation with her, because it wasn't safe for me and nor her.
Yeah.
So I think that, there's a 1-800 number that people can call, the hotline number. If it's a situation that's in front of you, call 911 and just give them the facts and say, here's what I think I saw, or what I did see, and hope for the best. That's really all that we can do.
Yeah.
Report it.
So I have kind of, this is a bit more of a difficult question, because I think about this a lot, and it's, so we know that these things take place, and there's people out there that perpetrate these types of acts or perform them or facilitate the trafficking. So how far do we go to protect ourselves and our loved ones without kind of, putting everyone in a bubble? You know what I mean?
That's a good question.
I think about that a lot as I travel, and I see different cultures and how they act. So, because I agree that people need to be protected, but I'm also like, at what cost do we have to protect it? At what cost are we protecting everyone?
So, in relation to the story that I told, I would rather make the big fuss that I made for her safety than not know, because I could have potentially saved her life. But I think, generally, you just have to educate people that, like, the people that are going to hurt you are not like the scary old man in the van, the white van, or behind the bushes. It's people that you know.
Yeah.
And that sounds really scary, and that sounds far out there. But if we just tell people that it's, stay safe, watch your drink, which you should anyways, but it sends like a false message.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a balance between, let's not like live in a bubble and live in fear, but also just be aware that most sexual violence occurs by someone you know.
Yeah, that's the scariest part to me, because it's probably the hardest to find out about until it's already, years down the road, and and you find out about it and you're just appalled because it happened right next door, or at a relative's house or something.
Exactly. Because I think what happens when you don't tell people, it's by people that you know. I spent my whole life thinking that I was the only person that experienced what I did, when in reality, that's what happens to most people.
Yeah.
And if I would have been armed with that knowledge, I think that my healing would have turned out a little bit different. If someone sat me down as a kid and say, like, here's the difference between what is healthy and normal and good for you, and here's like what shouldn't be happening,
Yeah.
I would have been able to tell, or I would have been able to handle that experience a little bit differently.
Yeah, maybe that's your next project, is
Right.
getting that education into schools so people can be aware.
And a lot of that's happening like already in the schools and things now, but it just takes a long time to have, change happen.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that is like, I could teach people all day long how to protect themselves, like give them knowledge and tools, but people will still perpetrate.
Yeah.
So
What do you do to reduce the number of people that are, well, there's a few of the issues. I think you brought them up in your TED Talk, the Johns,
Yep.
and then also like the family members that are, trafficking or selling.
totally.
How do you work on that problem?
That's such, that's a complex one because, some people would say, well, if there's stricter like laws or penalties or consequences for them, that would deter behavior. But I don't know if that deters behavior criminally. I think that there's a lot of mental health issues involved in a lot of this for people that, whether they're addicted to porn or just addicted to children or whatever that may be. There's a lot of work and help that they need in order to control those behaviors or deter those behaviors. So that's just beyond me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this show. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Trevor Carlson, and I appreciate you taking the time to stop by, and whether it's viewing our episodes or listening to our podcasts or reading our blog posts, all of you guys really help keep this show going. So I much appreciate your time and attention, and hopefully we provided a little bit of value for you. Now, if you're interested and you think you might enjoy getting some blog posts, emails, other podcasts, guides, any of that sort of thing sent to your inbox every week, go ahead and head over to theformulapodcast.com and sign up for our email list today. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks again, everyone, for stopping by, and I look forward to you tuning in next time.